We're learning more about U.S. military activity in Yemen. It comes as the U.S. conducts a series of new strikes there, the first since the raid that killed Navy SEAL Ryan Owens back in January. Well, now we're being told that this latest action is part of a stepped-up effort against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP. David Martin is our national security correspondent. When did this new effort start, David?
Well, the planning for it started during the final months of the Obama administration, when U.S. intelligence realized that al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula was taking advantage of the civil war inside Yemen to strengthen its position. It was capturing heavy weapons, artillery pieces, and things like that from government forces. It was going into towns and robbing banks and getting hard cash they could use to, in turn, recruit fighters. So there was a growing sense that AQAP, as it's known, was making somewhat of a comeback, and the military came up with a plan for countering that. The action part of that plan began on January 28th, when there was the commando raid against an al-Qaeda hideout in the central part of Yemen. That was approved by President Trump, but resulted in the death of the Navy SEAL Ryan Owens, and also of some 24 civilians. Now it is continuing with these airstrikes, and there have been now 2 nights of airstrikes in a row, about a total of more than 30 airstrikes altogether, targeting some of those heavy weapons, targeting weapons caches, targeting individual fighters, and targeting the buildings where some of these fighters live. And that more than 30 strikes is probably the most intense series of airstrikes that have been conducted against al-Qaeda inside Yemen.
Well, there have been a lot of questions, David, about whether January's deadly raid, the one that you referred to earlier, yielded any valuable intelligence. What did your source at the Pentagon have to say about that?
Well, he called the intelligence potentially actionable, and that's jargon, which means that someday it could be used to intercept a terrorist plot, like one of the ones I just described. But there was no smoking gun in the intelligence that said on such and such a date they're going to try such and such an attack. It was more in the form of cell phone numbers that were collected from laptops and cell phones and hard drives that will allow them to map out the al-Qaeda network in Yemen and just get a better understanding of the network. And if you're going to take down a network, which is obviously the goal of this stepped-up campaign, the first thing you have to do is map it out and understand it. And that's where they're at now.
These cell phones, though, David, many of them are like these disposable phones, aren't they, where they could easily just discard them, and that will then lead to a dead end? Well,
but you got to remember, the National Security Agency has been out there scooping up all these phone calls, and they file these phone calls. They don't have time to review them all, but they file these phone calls electronically, and if they get a phone number of interest that comes from somebody they believe to have been an operative, they can go back and see in the past what calls were made by those phones, and in some cases listen to what was said.